Welcome to 517 Lectures, part of Aesthetics of Architectural and Urban Research course at Kadir Has University Graduate Program of Architectural and Urban Research. We investigate architectural production beyond buildings and explore research and design of speculative and provocative nature. We'd like to echo late Lebbeus Woods and resist the idea that architecture is just a building. This semester, we critically explore the concept of the Anthropocene, the damaged planet, and the fact of climate change, while problematizing the typology known as the Museum of Natural History. The students will reevaluate the what, how, and why of a natural history museum of a damaged planet, while considering the urgencies of today, highlighted further by this pandemic. Our course is enriched by wonderful guests of various disciplines. We've had Claudia Taborda, a landscape architect who teaches at QUT right now, graduated from Harvard GST as our first lecturer, followed by Neyran Turan from Nema Studio. And today we have Mariana Pestana. She kindly joins us with her lecture, Designs for More Than One, Redefining Place and Community. Mariana is an architect and curator interested in critical social practice and the role of fiction in reimagining futures for an age marked by technological progress and an ecological crisis. She co-founded the collective The Decorators, an interdisciplinary practice that makes collaborative public interventions and cultural programs. Mariana has worked as a curator at the Department of Architecture, Design and Digital at the Victoria and Albert Museum and lectured at Central St. Martin's, Chelsea College of Arts and Royal College of Arts. Recently, she co-curated the exhibitions The Future Starts Here at the Victoria and Albert Museum and Eco-Visionaries, Art and Architecture After the Anthropocene at the MAAT, Eco-Visionaries Towards an Interspecies Future at Matadero, and a third iteration of the latter at the Royal Academy. You may know Mariana if you have, or not know, but you may have seen her work if you have recently visited the 5th Istanbul Design Biennial, which Mariana Pestana has curated. With the theme Empathy Revisited, Designs for More Than One. If I made any mistakes or if I have skipped any important detail, please chip in, Mariana, and I'm going to leave you with our class and our listeners.
Hi, thank you so much, Aslıhan, for the nice introduction, and it's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's great to meet you all and to be part of this important conversation around ecology and the future of the Natural History Museum. I'm going to talk about the Biennial, so I'll take you through a few projects of the Biennial this year in Istanbul. But I wanted to begin, and so I have a few images to show you. But before I start that, I wanted to just let you know a little bit about my thinking when beginning the Biennial. And I've shared this with Aslıhan to a great extent. Aslıhan was, I met her in an early visit to Istanbul. And so she has been involved in how the ideas developed, but I wanted to share that with all of you today. So I'm often asked why the theme of the Biennial sort of reflects or departs from this idea of empathy. And I think it's important to clarify where, that starting point. Empathy as a term has a very long and bumpy history. It has meant different things in different moments in time. When the term first emerged about 100 years ago, it was used as a translation of the German word Einfühlung, which means filling into. And the first people who wrote about empathy, or some of them, such as Violet Paget, who wrote under the pseudonym Vernon Lee. She wrote about empathy as this transference of feelings between and sensations between humans and non-human entities, such as the natural world and objects. And those objects could be very banal, like a chair, or they could be sculptures or paintings. And equally, she sometimes also referred to an element in the landscape, such as a mountain. And her view was that these objects elicited certain feelings in us. And so she dedicated herself to measuring what those feelings, what those sensations, how they were manifested in our bodies, right? The physiology of feeling, in a way, in relation to objects. And this beginning of the history of empathy was really what fascinated me. Nowadays, we understand empathy as the way we may relate to one another, or what it means to be in the shoes of someone else, what it means to imagine what others feel or to grasp the feelings of other people. But in that beginning, it was a more than human encompassing term. And this really, I found this very interesting because I thought, okay, now in 2020, we live in the age of artificial intelligence, in the age, we're living a very deep and serious climate crisis. What new possibilities does revisiting empathy open up? And this was a little bit the challenge that I set myself and then my curatorial team as well in this biennial. And then the subtitle of the biennial, Designs for More Than One, was in a way my attempt at defining an orientation, like an orientation for answering this problem, right? This question. What does revisiting empathy open up? And then I thought perhaps it's this idea of designs for more than one. And that means designs for more than one means a practice of design that doesn't consider just the immediate user or client as the ultimate recipient of any work that we create, but to consider the multitude of entities that are impacted by any design production. And we know now that a design project has consequences really far away from the place where it is produced. We know because there are practices of extraction, practices that are inherent to many or any, we could say, design project. And maybe this is something we can discuss a little bit at the end. But the idea here was to say, what if we start to think about design as a means to as a practice that addresses not just one but many bodies, not just one but many perspectives, what happens then? And so really this was, if you'd like, a framework to then include projects by practitioners, architects, designers, artists, activists that are already doing this. And so I think one characteristic of this biennial is that I think for every project that you will see on display, that project corresponds to a practice that is very deeply engaged in a particular, like we could say, ideology almost, right? Almost all the practitioners in this biennial are activists in the sense that they're the work that is presented is not just a one-off, but it's a project in that is part of a longer trail. Yeah. So I guess what I'm going to show you today, I selected a few projects that could help in this discussion that I would like to have with you after, of projects that make this effort in expanding what we think of as a community, right? When we design for more than one body, more than one perspective, we are thinking that we, as citizens, we are not, that citizenship is a more than human quality, that we cohabit our everyday with more than human entities. Just a note to say maybe about why I think this is important. So we are living through this climate crisis, and I know your program is focused on this idea of the post-Anthropocene context, right? Once we've recognized that we're in this new geological era, what happens? And what I found, and especially when I was doing the Eco Visionaries, which was a project that then it was quite long and it had many iterations, I found that I think we've been really good at raising awareness about the problem of the climate crisis, and even in the news, we're constantly presented with facts, with numbers, statistics that prove us constantly that we are living in this ecological crisis. But somehow, this very factual approach maybe isn't working anymore. I mean, I think that a lot of people became numb in relation to the way that this information is being presented to us. And so, what I particularly kind of suspect is an interesting way forward is to open up a space for emotional attachment, to discuss how we are, how we develop effective emotional connections with the world around us. And so that's also something that is, I think, kind of an idea that runs across the program this year. And so I'll, without further ado, I will take you through it. This is not just my work. I was joined by Sumitra Upham and Billy Muraben as part of my core curatorial team. And I've also created for this edition of the Biennial, a group of curators based in Istanbul, which I have called the Young Curators Group. And they are Ulia Soley, Eylül Şensiz, and Nur Horsanala. And together, I will speak a little bit about how they were involved in the program. But yeah, this is what I'm going to show to you is really a collaborative effort. So I'll try to share my screen. So yeah, this is the title that I was telling you about, Empathy Revisited, Designs for More Than One. The structure of the biennial this year follows 4 key programs. One is a digital program, the Critical Cooking Show. Another is a research program called the Library of Land and Sea. Then there's an intervention program, which we called New Civic Rituals. And finally, a film program that is called Empathy Sessions. So I'll take you through the first 3, but then if you want, we can also discuss, if you have been to Pera and have visited, have watched some of the films in Empathy Sessions, we can talk about that too. But I'll take you through a few examples from each of the first 3. So the Critical Cooking Show is a program that exists only in the digital realm, even though some of the films are displayed at Pera Museum as well. And every week we release a new episode of this Critical Cooking Show. We hope that you as visitors, as viewers of this Critical Cooking Show, become not just cooks, but that you become critical cooks, right? The idea is to use a format that has already existed for a long time. It's the cooking show, right? It has a long history. It's very much connected with TV culture. And it's a format that lends itself quite well to being watched from home. This was something quite important to us, because I find that even a conference like this, or a discussion like the one we're having today, it's a format that normally happens in person. We are transferring it into the digital realm. So here we wanted to develop a program that felt in a way a little bit natural, from home, and also that it was a call for action to some extent. So cooking shows traditionally maybe encourage you to try a new recipe, for example. Here we want to encourage you to develop critical ideas around what cooking means around your kitchen, who is part of your kitchen, etc. So I'll show you an excerpt of As Above, So Below, which is a film by Mariana Sanchez Salvador and Rain Wu. Mariana is an architect, and she has been researching. She did a book which is about the history of architecture through the kitchen. So it's almost like an analysis of how architecture evolved over time, but by looking only at kitchens. And Rain Wu is an artist. In her maybe earlier iterations, Rain was working a lot with food and narrative. And these days, she still uses a lot of the materials she uses for her sculptures, for example, are food related. But now she's developed more of a sculptural practice, if you'd like. So I'll play. I wanted to play. Oh, what's happening? Let me see if it's because I'm sharing. Oh, there seems to be a problem. I'm really sorry. Maybe I'll come back to this one at the end, and I'll play it from my file. Then of course, what's interesting about that film that I was going to show you is that it really makes a connection between the very macro scale of planetary movements and the micro scale of food ingredients. So it's an exercise in sort of connecting very far away scales, if you'd like. And in a way, it's an interesting kind of introduction to the approach we're taking in this program about how we look at food. Eisenash Toker and Merve Tuna are two designers, one that based in Istanbul, one with product design background and one with a fashion design background. And they are very interested in how objects elicit certain behaviors in amongst ourselves beyond just their utilitarian function. And so their film, their contribution to the cooking show really uses food and ingredients and tools, but it introduces superstition and magic into the way that they are articulated, but also the way that they produce a certain kind of agency by shaping how we behave together in space. So I hope this one will play. Can't believe this is not, it was playing just before. No. Okay. So what I'll do is I'm sorry. I'll just play it from here.
No problem at all.
So I think that next week you will be able to watch this film. on our website and channel. And then there are certain episodes, certain films in this program that invite you to consider what is at stake when when you're in the kitchen. What other inhabitants are part of your everyday actions, and some of them may be that you don't notice. Softening Cultures by Ben Goldner and Emily MacDonald looks at fermentation as a practice that nourishes microbial life. It's a very, of course, old-age practice, but they ask this question, at what scale must a microbial culture grow for it to generate empathy amongst ourselves? And what shape must that take? If it's molds, perhaps it doesn't generate as much empathy. If it's fermented, it does. So their film is really about this conflicting relationship we have with microbial life. And again, it's not playing, so I apologize. And I will just take you to the film. Okay. So, yeah, I wish we could watch all the films, but of course that would take us forever. So they work here as... can you watch my screen? Sorry. Oh, again.
Currently,
You're looking at me, right? Okay,
yes,
it's coming up.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's here right now.
Yes. Great. So we wanted to make a program that would focus on food because of a number of reasons, and maybe we can discuss again this later on. But just looking at, for example, the IPCC report that came out, I think just over a year ago, on soil, it's interesting to understand. One of the conclusions there is that one of the most effective ways for us to tackle the climate crisis as individuals is through food. And that report shows that unless we make radical changes to our diet, we won't be in any way capable of course, feeding everyone in the planet in the very near future. But we also won't be able to keep global average temperatures at levels that are healthy for our survival, for the survival of our species. And so it's very important. Food is one of those subjects that everyone has an opinion about it. It is at the same time very banal, but also incredibly serious. And so this was a very conscious decision that we took to put food in a way at the center of the discussion, but use design as a tool to analyze food production, consumption, and sourcing, and so this was the critical cooking show. But of course, this is something that runs across some other programs. So I'll take you to the second part of the program, which we called New Civic Rituals. So rituals are, of course, sets of behaviors or actions. Normally, they take a particular order. and sometimes they have a symbolic meaning. Here we wanted to create rituals or incite rituals that would invite people to develop new etiquettes or new protocols as citizens, and in relation to their sort of immediate communities. Um, some of the projects on display, they put forward what we have internally called human empathy. Others, more like, perform perhaps more planetary empathy. Others perform interspecies empathy. So I'll show you a few examples. So the Revolution Wood Stove, for example, is a project by Beats the Atoms and Beirut Makers, which we installed in Istanbul. And this was a project that began in Lebanon as in support for the revolution that was happening there in 2019, in especially in the months of winter, where protesters and the revolution makers were out in the streets, and so feeling cold at night. A group of makers came together to produce this, which is a very simple stove that has, well, the way it's built, the way it's designed is very interesting, because it's designed to be assembled with no welding necessary, and it's cheap to make and very quick to produce, to mount, right? So it's something that can be assembled very quickly. And what you can do with it is, of course, warm up. So the whole structure becomes quite warm. So you see this part coming in. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but in this side, this is where you put the wood. So here's a log, some logs, for example. So you start a fire inside of the stove, and then the whole stove heats up. And then there are areas like this one where you can heat up, for example, tea or coffee. And then there's a smaller unit on the side where you can bake or make kind of simple meals or heat up meals. So in bringing it to Istanbul, we were interested in it as a design object. For these projects, we decided to go outside into the streets, to intervene in the city rather than displaying them in a closed exhibition. This was in part because of the circumstances with COVID regulations. We knew that it was very difficult for everyone to visit exhibitions due to restricted numbers, etc. So we decided to bring the contents that we could to bring them out. But then we were faced with a problem, like, how could we bring these projects to the streets, but ensure that they weren't just going to be parachuted into the city with, how could they be meaningful? So we created a system where we defined a host for each of these projects, or most of these projects. So in this case, for example, Urban Co-op, who are a group of young architects and urbanists, became the hosts of Made in Beirut and Beats the Atoms Revolution Stove. So that means that they met online several times, and that Urban Co-op were also involved in the choosing of the location where the stove was to be installed. And even when we were installing it on site, we were all there together with Urban Co-op, sort of deciding where exactly we should put the stove. But they've also began conversations before the installation with people that are on site, such as tea sellers and even people who sleep nearby. And then conversations during the project. So, for example, now Urban Co-op are organizing a conversation with makers in and maker spaces and maker studios in Istanbul. Key to this was the work of Eylül Chances. So Eylül is part of the Young Curators Group, and that group I mentioned to you at the beginning, these curators based in Istanbul. And so their work was extremely important, especially during these circumstances when me and other curators couldn't travel to Istanbul. They became absolutely crucial. So they were responsible for ensuring that these projects established a dialogue with the context of the city. And also they're programming a series of events and workshops. So if you're interested, please join them and sign up. So most of the information is published on the Tazarin Biennale Instagram and sort of social media channels. Please, you're very, very welcome to join. So far, we've done a number of these projects. Others will happen in the spring of next year. And the idea is that they become permanent, unless they, permanent until, for as long as people are willing to care for them and use them. From the moment they don't do that, then it doesn't make any more sense that they're outside. But during that period, we want to keep them on. So we worked with municipalities and so on to ensure that they can stay a long time. But one of the projects that we are doing for the spring of 2021 is a project by Orkan Telhan, who is a Turkish artist, and Eli, a Spanish architectural practice. And they have been doing a really beautiful research project. So they've collected soil from different gardens in Istanbul, from all of the bostans, and they're analyzing the microbial life that exists in these soils, and they're narrating in a way the stories that these microbes tell, either because of their provenance or the way that they are mixed up, or there's so much you can read into it. So they're working in collaboration with a university to read, let's say, what they find. And in the spring, what we will open is a structure more or less like this one you see in the image, which is a platform or a kiosk almost, that where a parrot, so you can see the parrots here on top, will narrate the histories, the stories of these different microbial cultures, and it will also we will also distribute a fermentation kit, so that you as visitors can become almost guardians of these microbial cultures by inserting them in your yogurt or boza, or the permanency in this project is more in perhaps in your own bodies, right? In the sense that by ingesting these microbial cultures, you're in a way sort of giving continuity to their life. And they're also researching boza, as a chain mechanism of culture, of microbial culture continuity, because there is this myth a little bit about boza, like how and when did boza start? Because every new drink is made from a part of the previous drink. So there's this model of continuity. So this is usually the kind of outcome that you will see with a project like this. These are popsicles that are made with what Orkan calls microbial fruits. So it's a means, it's almost like a transformation of the microbial culture into something that can be eaten, usually with a lot of pepper. So it creates the sensation of heat, which in turn is a mechanism for you to think critically about climate change. So there's a provocation normally in the way that then these popsicles are ingested, just because you feel so hot because of pepper. They change your sense of temperature. But there are other projects that you might have seen already in the city. For example, this one by Soraya Gomes Teixeira responds to the context of digital gathering, like the one we're having today. And she was already researching this, what she calls like a crisis of human contact that, in a way, was brought about by the digital paradigm. But of course, now in the time of COVID, just gained another resonance. And so she created these public devices for therapy. So they are a set of sculptures that have very simple instructions in them. So the part of the body that you should put in touch with the structure. And they are meant to work almost as therapeutic devices to reconnect us with one another and for us to regain confidence in the proximity of other people's bodies. in another project, for example, by Soft Baroque, is Point Cloud. And so if you go to the Beşiktaş pier, you will encounter these works, and they might look to you at first as just this playful set of furniture. But what's interesting about it is that they mimic the way in which machines read reality. So you might you of course all know this, that machines, when they read reality, they create these what are called these point clouds. So for example, facial recognition systems, they will attribute points to certain and then they will connect those points, and then by doing that create a three-dimensional mesh that then becomes a form. And so what Soft Baroque were interested in was to allow us to see in a way from the perspective of a machine. And so they created this set of furniture that in a way mimics that machinic perspective. It creates a series of points, and then the connections between them are just a bit more playful than they normally are. And this is, of course, a commentary on the automation of design processes. And it's an invitation also for us to imagine a future of full automation when machines design reality. And the question that they really are interested in asking is, when machines become designers, I mean, can they have fun doing in this process? Can they enjoy a process of design? And so this is what we would call kind of a machinic empathy exercise, right? So this attempt at seeing the world from a different perspective again, and in this case, it's the perspective of AI or machines. And then finally, I wanted to tell you about the Library of Land and Sea. So this is a research project. When we were faced with the inevitability of the pandemic crisis, this was a very reflective moment for us in the curatorial team, and we thought, okay, what would be meaningful for us to do? And we decided at this point that there were a series of projects that would, at least from our perspective, they would benefit from from research time rather than the focus on showing a finished outcome. And so this is when we decided to create a space that would take the form of a library. We said, okay, why don't we launch these 10 research projects? They are all, they're made by architects, urbanists, researchers, activists, and they investigate geopolitical tensions connected with food production in the region of the Mediterranean. So you have probably visited the library at this point. We thought that also the library as a setup would be an invitation for visitors to become researchers in their own right. So we thought we would display the works as an archive almost, so that then visitors could pick them up wearing gloves and so on and start to make connections between them. Of course, I don't know if this is the case, if this has happened or not, but our idea was to create a space with tables and seating where people could spend a little bit of time with the content safely, also in terms of COVID. So to briefly give you an overview, I'll just talk about a few projects. This project by Delia Adeyemo, I decided to include it because, in a way, this project, we proposed this setup of investigating the land and the sea of the Mediterranean basin as a geopolitical side. And then Dele turned this question at us and said, well, he started looking at sugarcane plantation and the early experiments of planting sugar in the island of Madeira, which is a Portuguese colony, was a Portuguese colony and is now part of the Portuguese territory. And this, according to him, was the first exercise in global capitalism. But he said with this project, he showed that in order for us to consider the political geography of the Mediterranean, we would have to distort it and bring the Mediterranean all the way to the coast of Guinea, where slaves were taken from and brought to the island of Madeira to work on these plantations that were this first force of global capitalism. So in this case, for example, in Dele's work, there's a selection of books, including a book that Dele did himself. But then there are this curtain and these image that Dele created, which is really a composition, a superposition of different drawings that he found during his research. So he was looking at European representations of sugarcane, for example, sugarcane plantations themselves, the first plants in flower, etc., but also all of the activities of commerce, etc., that were associated with it. But then he was also looking at representations of the Yoruba, which shows just a different perspective on the same subject. And then he started superposing them. And this image that you see here is almost like a map of the world. It's an alternative ontology, if you'd like, that kind of plays with these different perspectives. So here's an overview of some of the books that were brought to the archive as part of this research. I've included here Agros Istanbul because I thought it would be interesting maybe for Aslıhan to tell us as well. I don't know, Aslıhan, have you presented this to this group yet? So maybe I've included an image of the map curtain, and then an image of these the cards of the let's say COVID food production survey in Istanbul. Maybe do you want to briefly talk about it?
Oh, very briefly, because I don't want to interrupt your flow. Well, this is, I may have mentioned, but this is basically the outcome of our work in Architecture 516, the class before this, the graduate studies we did. That was, it's topics in infrastructure, landscape, and nature. And we've done this work with Seda Baydur, Aygün Çınar, Merve Yumuk, Onur Değirmenci, Uveys Humus, and Gözde Yiğit. Gözde and Seda have worked on this map. And Murat Tülek was so wonderful to help us. Without him, we wouldn't be able to do this map. Not do, but generate. One of the things we've learned throughout this process was that you don't draw maps, but you generate them out of data. So basically, this is Productive Istanbul. This is where Istanbul produces food and distributes food. And we wanted this map to be not just not based only on quantitative data, at which the scale only the big areas can be seen, but we also wanted it to be qualitative. Therefore, you can see the extinct and existing bostans and community gardens, things that are so small that in a city planning scale you do not see, but are very, very essential. And also Merve, the cards that Mariana was talking about was Merve Yumuk went through Instagram. She chose just one social media outlet for reasons of time and effort limitations. But she went ahead and searched with the hashtags stay at home, evde kal, etc., life fits home, hayat eve sığar. And she looked at all the efforts that, and all the craze maybe even, that people had gone through during the quarantine to just make a bean sprout and then possibly turn into a bean, 1 bean, 2 beans, 3 beans, but to see something grow, to grow something. There's also a lot more to, I mean, this is right now is very raw data, if you will, that begs to be interpreted. You know, we have this like wealth right now, but we need to be able to read it afterwards, I guess. Oh, earthable.
Yes. And then I included this because I just think this picture captures really. It's taken about just a few days after the installation, and it captures this moment when we saw the first
I know,
plant.
baby.
Maybe. When nobody could believe that something would just spontaneously grow. And the other day, I was speaking about this project, and I wanted to remember something you said, Aslıhan, the other day, which was that soil occurs. Was that how did you put it?
Yeah, that this is that earthable. This is an occurrence. Isn't it? Doesn't exist, but it occurs. I because we always look at our lives, at things we design, at the world as things that exist. But in fact, they are all occurrences. I mean, we are all occurrences. We're not the same the next second. The world is not the same next second. So if we start seeing um, um, the things we design, and in this case, this is basically, it's to make you a little bit crazy about what you're looking at, because by crazy I mean by when you start blurring all the typologies, or blurring all the familiar, because this is basically a setup for a dinner of 8. Because you can sit down and or you can have a meeting, you can talk over food, talk over something, you're around at the table. But what you need to do is you have to do certain kinds of choices, because if you, and currently today Ra sent me the new sets. It's all green, everything's green. It's very beautiful. And but you need to actually decide whether you're going to sit down. And if you want to sit down, you're going to sit on plants that are occurring, that are sprouting. And what you actually eat, what you put on the table, is actually still growing, and it's a medium, and it's shared by tons of organisms. So I mean, it may be all embedded in it, but it has a lot of things going on. At least
Yeah, but there's also this incredible surprise that this is just soil.
yes,
That
just
nothing
that.
has been planted. So it's such a beautiful way to show that the life that occurs in soil, right, spontaneously.
Yes.
Because it is outdoors, then when it rains, then there's water, and of course these all of these organisms thrive. And that is a surprise in itself. I mean, I know that a lot of people were surprised to see it grow spontaneously like that.
Exactly. I mean, if you keep your soil rich, this is very rich soil with organic matter in it, and this is what is basically what has been talked about recently. That if you have a rich soil, we can start locking in carbon, and that's like one way of actually going on, where you actually enrich your soil. And when your soil is rich, everything that you don't even actually see, the pollens, everything, they're actually doing a lot of work that we don't sometimes, we're not even aware of it. So it's all green now. I'm very happy.
Yeah, exactly. And then other projects, I'll just show you one more and then we can start the conversation. There's, for example, Tirilab, who are based in Greece. They have been doing an exercise of mapping community kitchens, normally in the Thesprotia region of Greece. These kitchens are normally run by women, often women cooperatives. And Tirilab started to visit these kitchens, take photographs, and do drawings of them to try and understand their architecture, but also the kinds of recipes that circulate in the kitchens, the people that occupy them, the tools that are part of them, etc. And what was fascinating was that before this research project, these kitchens were not aware of one another. So there would be a community with one of these public kitchens and another one 2 miles away. But because there's like mountains in between, or, it's just a little bit far away, they didn't know that the next village also had a community public kitchen. And so it became quite interesting to start to see them as a typology. And one of the early drawings that Tirilab have done so far, besides the photographs and all of it, is the drawing. Sorry, it's the drawing you see here in this image. This is not the best picture, but just it's an exercise in synthesizing what is common about these kitchens. So certain tools, certain types of spaces, and a certain sense of organization, that what they established as common to them, they've then put into this drawing. But the project will evolve, and this is a characteristic of all of these projects, is that they are research based, so they're not necessarily finished with what is shown in this library. And so we hope in the spring of next year to, either through a public program or other, to then share with you what the findings of these research projects were. And so, yeah, I guess I'll end here. And I look forward to our conversation. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much. And so I think, thank you so much. It's, I mean, even though I have been part of it, and even though I have, as you said, followed from the get-go of the biennial, there's still so much. I mean, I think what is very interesting and very successful about this biennial, I find, is that each work is so layered and so detailed, and so the more you look, the more you find. Mm-hmm. So they are not they are not just, like, as you said, like one-off. You want to continue to follow them or to further research. So it's so I can congratulate you, the entire team, Sumitra and Billy and Ulya, Eylül, and Nur. Beautiful job. And I also want to say that the first time I actually led this course, Eylül was one of the first students of this course. So we send our love to Eylül from here, if she's watching, or if she will watch. So my students are all here. We can possibly, maybe I will ask Nejat to put everybody's heads in the gallery view, so we can give Mariana a little bit of a breather. But I don't know if I can do that. But did it change right now? I don't know. I'm not very accustomed to this technology.
For me, at least, now I can see everyone.
Okay, sounds wonderful. It seems like I have a bit of control. So as I mentioned to you, Mariana, I've asked the crowd to also read some chapters from Matters of Care. So we have that in the parallel, but I think they will have a lot of questions regarding the biennial first. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping.
Me too.
Yeah. So, and I know that they've been looking at all the projects in advance from the links they've been sharing with each other. So does anyone want to go ahead and, while we have Mariana here, and ask some questions? Bad English, it doesn't matter, just roll on.
I think there's a question. Nihan.
I can start.
Yes.
Firstly, thanks for the presentation. I think it's so fruitful and meaningful to listen this project from you. I don't have a question, but I would like to add something, which that reminds me when you talk about a different definition of empathy, such as transference at feeling between human and non-human worlds, the objects. It was a story from one of my friends. This one of my friends, he had been told this story. He comes from Konya, but his family is still live in Konya, and his mother's side is connected with the Mevlevi, whirling dervishes, connected to Sufism, and his grandmother was a Mevlevi leader in her village. And the story about, I think it's just an anecdote about their habits, in their eating habits, which before eating, it doesn't matter, it was lunch or breakfast, uh, she was always kiss the spoon and takes her forehead in 3 times, and all of the objects. They made this ritual because of the soul of the objects. They have a secret. They attach the sacred meaning of all of the objects. And when he came Istanbul, probably a month or two, he was continuing this ritual, but his friends told that this was a little bit weird. Please don't do that. And I think it just looks like a ceremony before the eating, but in their belief, all of the things have this sacredness. And it was lead to me to thought more about the ethics of care. I think it's very connected because I know commodification and the materialism is inevitable. We know that, but the notion of the slowdown has a very important potential to understand the meaning and the soul of these objects. And I think so many non-vocal beliefs make this throughout the history. This is not a new thing. But I think also in our readings, these ethics of care have benefits to see these micro stories in our nature, I think. I'm just probably I should think about more about this slowdown and these rituals around me in my nature. Yeah, that's all. I just want to add this story. Thank you so much again.
What a wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing it. And yes, it's interesting because I have been asked a few times whether there is, well, not directly maybe, but I've sensed that this was kind of inherent to some questions that I've received to do with nostalgia. I mean, is this a nostalgia for the past? I mean, is there some kind of nostalgia for the past? But I really don't think so. I do think that progress is not linear, of course, and that that history is not a linear path, and it's something much more bumpy, much more irregular, and we should question this linearity of progress that's being imposed on us, right? And I think if there's one thing that I believe this the pandemic crisis already revealed is that there's also like a crisis of this global industrial model, and this and so perhaps I think it's very interesting now to look at these much more specific non-universal, non-global ways of thinking about design. Because just that very idea that of one size fits all, or the idea that a good idea is one that can be scalable, I think these are sort of, imported ideas that are generated in very particular contexts, such as Silicon Valley and others. But I think we have the duty to question them today. And I think instances like these are incredibly rich, as signposts, I think, of, other, I see them almost like parallel locations, right? They happened just in a parallel place, just maybe a few years ago, not so distant. And why isn't that sort of a forking path of where we, of going forward? I think that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing.
Anyone else want to chip in? Okay, Sezgi, and then Asim, can you follow Sezgi?
Great. Mine is, again, I'm not sure if it leads to a question, but when I've seen the pictures of Aslan's project, the Earth table, I wondered if I've seen the the pictures with the plants on it recently, after I've seen the empty table a few weeks ago, maybe. And I wondered if you have planted anything. And while I was reading the Matters of Care, the book by Della Casa, she asks. She says that she's hinting at the care that comes from other than humans. And she says that maybe this is a point of view which is too anthropocentric, but I remembered the book by Masanobu Fukuoka, One Straw Revolution, I think. He's a Japanese agricultural engineer who turned out to be a agricultural philosopher, and he says that even if we if we continue planting to grow more and more stuff, it's not we who is controlling what the nature gives us back. But if we just throw away the seed bombs that he invents, and now many anarchic groups continue doing this ritual, nature will give us food that will be enough for us. And there are many farms that are following his steps around the world, and who are also saying that it does work, and nature does take care of the people who throw these random bombs of seed. So now that we have seen the project of Aslan Hoca, I wondered if there were any seeds in it, or if you knew that from the pictures there were definitely seeds in it, but I wondered if they were planted before. And the second point that came to my mind is about the revolution wood stove. I think that today all the food making is in private spaces, even if it's on the street, even if it's street food, it's controlled by the private restaurant or the vendor who sells the food. But I think with the wood stove, the food making becomes public. It comes to a horizontal space. Okay, I'm not sure where it leads, but
yeah, I just want to make a quick comment, and then I'll pass on to Aslıhan for her to speak about the nature of the seeds in the soil. Just to say that yes, indeed, like the idea is to make certain food making activities public, or to return them to the public space where they have been and they are in many places, but and that the stove is one amongst more projects. So in the spring of 2021, you can also expect to then have access to a solar kitchen that is designed by Marti Gische, and which will be open for people to gather and cook. It's a kitchen that uses solar energy only, but it's very simple, the mechanism, but you can make coffee in 5 minutes, for example. And so we will have a booking system. So please, it would be wonderful if you would, even organize as a class and go and have maybe one of your meetings there. It would be interesting. And then there's also, we're working with Public Works, and in the Kuzgunjuk Urban Garden, they are doing a series of units for preserving food. So through smoking, through drying, and other techniques, and these again will be open to the public. And the idea is to also make these acts a little, to share these as common resources. Of course, all of these projects are experiments, right? It's not our position is to open up a space for experimentation. So this is very much how I see public cultural programs as well. I think that cultural programs can generate space where risk can be taken, because out there in the real world, this is often not the case. So I think it's really important. Also, this is how new ideas come about, where radical fictional imaginary ideas can gain a certain reality. I think it's in these, I think exhibitions and cultural programs are this space between reality and fiction. That's what I'm really passionate about. So this is to say, obviously the success of these works will depend on the interest that is generated around them, but also they we'll see if they work. I mean, and that is okay. I think that's okay if they don't work exactly how we imagine them to. But yeah, Aslıhan, maybe you want to just clarify the seed.
I'll talk about the seed business, but also to add to your what you were saying, Mariana. I think the experimenting and also trying things in small dosages. I think that's very also important. Also, especially if you're doing something in the public sphere, because when, for instance, you mentioned that almost all of the works or the designers are in a certain sense of the word are all activists. So they have been researching or trying or experimenting for a longer period of time than just to get ready for an exhibition. And in that kind of activism, there's always this kind of confrontation when you are rooting for someone for somewhere. And if there is already if you're building for a community, there's always this part of the intervention or proposition where whether it will be received or not, whether it will be whether you're welcome or not, etc. So and I think this like a small little Sobat Altaura just is a very nice question of whether you want it or not. Do you like this? Or then it can become something maybe appropriated and something that is a dear, it becomes a dear furnace or an oven, maybe the kitchen, etc. So I think the scales of things and to make things a little bit propositional or question marky, I think that's one aspect that these projects all have in common. So they're not imposing on where it's actually placed. So I think that's important. And as for the seeds, we didn't plant anything. What we did is the soil, we gracefully Aysun'da Sütçü and gün dönümü çiftliği, gün dönümü farm, they have loaned us, they have given us the soil. And the way we came about them is I was talking with Durukan Dudu from Anadolu Meraları, who are doing regenerative agriculture. We are working on concepts, repairing architecture, etc. I'm going to tie into that, so I'm slipping there. And I was having a conversation with him. So how do I show what an actual real soil in the city does? Because we don't see it. I mean, we go to the park, there's grass on it, or there's something on it, it's cultivated, it's planted. We go, we buy soil, we buy turf from the supermarket and put our plants in there. We in Istanbul or in many other cities, buying compost, this, that, but that, they are pretty marginal practices. So we don't get to see the joy and the kind of fertility of actual soil with all the bacteria, the fungi, everything in it. So and what it does. And while you can actually talk about all the protozoa, this, that, and I actually enjoyed writing them in the brief, but then I also found myself trying to distance myself from this scientific researcher point of view, and instead try to put forth and make everyone who visits it a witness or a bystander to this wonderful process, where if you if you take care of the soil, and it's another care practice. If you take care of the soil, you don't have to cultivate it. You don't have to. You don't basically have to do anything. So this is basically a small trial of rewilding, if you will, which hopefully is going to turn into a series of small gardens and small lots in the city. Hopefully we will do it with the municipality as the continuation of this project. And this actually this is like a little bit of a U-turn that this Corona quarantine made me do, because they were going to be more like food oriented. And our farmers in Yedikule Bostans, they plant the seeds saying for the worm, for the bird, and for the food. So 1/3 we eat, and the 2/3 are for all the other animals, for the worm and the birds. So the quarantine made me think, how can we do a garden for the worm and for the bird? So it's basically, it will be a trial, because we'll see how it goes. It's for us, like designers, we're all control freaks. We always want to see and imagine that's what we do. And how do you let that go? And how do you just like trigger something? So it will be an experiment on that.
Mm-hmm.
I actually wondered, when I've seen these two projects, I wondered about the most positive and most negative possibilities. If anyone has interacted with the wood stove, tried to burn the wood, and if the local police, Bekçi, came and stopped, like, this is art, don't touch it, or if they managed to, I don't know, make tea or something. And on the case of the herb table, if people have planted the seeds, or if people put their cigarette butts on the these two extreme parts as possibilities came to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if anyone interacted with the projects?
Well, I know for the stove, so it's quite funny actually, because we installed it, and then we realized that the stove was going to be quite hot when because we tried it just to, during the installation, and we told everyone, or Eylül because I cannot speak Turkish, sadly, told everyone around, please don't use this yet. We are going to make some signage. So the stove is not opened until the 15th, which was the opening date of the Biennial. And I think there was a signage as well or something like that. But we just wanted to print these stickers on the ground to tell people, careful, it's hot. But then that night we went out for dinner and then Sumitra had arrived. So we wanted to show her the stove. And so we just walked by, we went to it, and then I put my hand on it and it was warm already. So this was the day after. So it had been used. And, it was this moment when we got a little bit panicked. Oh my God, people are using it and it's not open yet. But at the same time, quite happy. Oh, that's good. People are using it, And since then, sadly I had to leave Istanbul, and so I hear about the works from the team there. But what Eylül tells me about the stove is that yes, it is being used regularly. I think there have been some graffitis on the stove, but no serious damage. But I think that's inevitable once you put a project out in the public realm, and also I guess depending on where you put it and how adjusted it is to that reality, it may happen that that damage will occur. And it's not to say, I think sadly often that is done by some and not others. So even though there might be like a caring community, then someone might come in one night and just like do harm. And I think it's it's an interesting discussion to have, because also policing it, I don't think it's the way to control that kind of damage. So I don't know. It's an open question, I guess.
I don't think that graffiti is damage, but it's a way of communication between the inhabitants of the area. So I think it's
no, of course,
included in the communication, as I see.
Yeah, yeah. Other works have suffered some damage, though. Mm-hmm.
I mean, once we actually with Claudia Taborda, we had done a workshop on Yedikule Bostans. The kids had done a small soccer field by just playing on it, and we went with the students, and we wanted with wooden pallets to make a bleacher stadium seating. It's very detailed 1 day event. Everything happened in that event, but at the very end of the day, the sun set, and this guy came and he said, like, give me this. I want to burn it tonight. And the kids were like, what are you doing? We did this. We constructed it with our hands. We like nailed it. And the guy said, like, no, I have no wood and I just want to burn it. And if you guys go, and the kids were standing and waiting for the night. But of course, at some point, their mothers called them in. And next morning, it wasn't there. It was burnt. I mean, in a way, it's very interesting. So where you put something, it's really, I mean, there's so much dynamics there. And actually, we were happy. The guy had like, I don't know how many nights worth of wood that he could get warm with. So, so I guess you have to, in public, you put forth something, you just have to let it go and disown it in a way. It just starts its own life. And for the earthable, well, one, it's at the terrace of an art space. So, and there's always a host. There's a certain kinds of people who are going in, art looking people. So their attention on the objects is that it's more like design work, etc. But if I had put the same thing, maybe with the same people, maybe you would get cigarette butts. If the same crowd, I don't know. So, but that's why I'm giving the fine line there. It's highly unlikely that someone would, put their cigarettes butts in that space and in that context, because they're going to look at it. The other thing is, Cats, of course. I mean, we're in Istanbul and they are very, very happy with it. And they are doing all sorts of things, sleeping and including all other kinds of activities. And there's a good communication between the plants and the cats, actually. They are somehow getting along with each other. So okay.
I think there were some questions maybe from other people. Maybe shall we just?
Yeah,
we'll
I think
come back
Asil has
to
been
you.
waiting patiently.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I think Ömer is in line right now. Okay. So maybe we go a little faster and.
Yeah. It's a bit brief. Miss Pestana, we appreciate your.
Call me Mariana, please. Yeah.
Okay. We appreciated your presentation. Just you started your presentation by definite the empathy by saying feeling into the common perspective, and also the saying the machinery will design works without human. And my question is, do you think that the machinery or AI will be empathic as human? And the secondly, where do you put AI for your future works?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because of course AI is created by humans. And there was an assumption in your, I guess, in your question that can a machine be empathetic like humans, as a and when you look at artificial intelligence and how it deals with otherness, with diversity, for example, you will find that there are a lot of biases. So, for example, one of the films that we have in the Empathy Sessions program, that's at Para Museum until the 16th, I believe, is by EBA Camp. And it's a project that speaks precisely about that, how AI technology has dealt with the color, with skin color over time. And she looks specifically at Shirley cards that were sort of cards used to calibrate colors in photography, and how late that technology became capable of recognizing people of color, for example. And then she makes a parallel with contemporary technologies, with AI. And well, she looks at early AI and its incapacity or its permanent or common failure in recognition of darker skin tones, and the terrible consequences that it had, for example, in terms of misidentifying in suspects in police investigation, or so this technological incapacity to let's say, in this case very specifically, to deal with a diversity of skin colors has terrible consequences for reality. Now, those technologies are created by human beings, and perhaps the question that we should be asking ourselves is, who is creating those technologies, and who is involved in the discussions, ethical discussions around those technologies, and are those groups of people representative enough? A lot of technological companies are ran by white males between their 20s and 40s. That's a very specific segment of society, and I think one must ask, in order to in order to for those technologies to be more efficient, ethical, what do we need to do? But I guess in here we were interested in discussing this, how design also allows us to to consider these different perspectives. But AI, I think, is a really big one. And you might also be interested in another film by Paula Gaetano Adi, which is also in the same program. It's a really fascinating film about, again, the robots that we are producing today, and it's almost like a manifesto for us to create other kinds of robots. Robots that she calls mestizo robots that represent other worldviews, because the ones that we have right now, they represent a very particular worldviews, and maybe we should be claiming that space a bit more. But yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you.
I actually took a note here because when you were talking about one of the projects, it reminded me of an inverse thought of Tony Damasio's idea of consciousness. The neuroscientist, he actually he says that our consciousness has evolved because of our pain and feelings and the fear of dying. And he talks about this mechanism in our body called homeostasis, which actually tells us, am I okay? Am I going to live, or is there something wrong going on? That's what that mechanism tells you when you go like, well, I think I'm feeling sick a little bit. When something is off, that's the mechanism. And that mechanism is actually embodied. So it's not in the brain only. So what Damasio has actually come forth with is that your feelings are embodied, and these embodied feelings are what has developed consciousness. So in order to apply this to the computational world, to the AI in general, can it have feelings, etc.? Because this is a very much debated subject. And the whole idea, the brain can be somehow simulated by computation, but the embodiment is very, very difficult. If you don't have a body that you're fearful of, that consciousness is not developed in the same way, it could be something that could be looked into. Asil, you can.
So funny, Aslıhan. Look at this is the book I have right next to me.
No, that's the. He was like. I mean, he also speaks very, very elegantly and softly. So I listened to all of his videos during the quarantine. I became like a fan.
Yeah.
Wow,
No, but,
interesting.
Interesting. It's funny. But yeah, I'm also fascinated by also this idea of this chicken and egg, right, between where emotions, where feelings are generated, and they're both bodily and mental, which is fascinating. Yeah. It's funny.
Ömer, do you want to chip in?
Yes. I would like to ask you more about the Biennial. What's the project you feel most sorry for that you couldn't do it in Istanbul due to pandemic? Are there any projects like that?
Well, not one project in particular. So when the pandemic happened, what we tried was to keep all the projects going, but we reorganized how they were going to be developed and shown to the public. So we may have cancelled a few, but as little as we could. But there's one thing maybe that originally the Biennial was going to have a much more physical presence, and so the idea behind the critical cooking show type of projects was that they were going to happen in real time, and they were going to be more like performance lectures where, I don't know if you've watched, for example, the first episode that we launched by Valeria Myler and Agustin Shang, which is called The Case of Meat, and they've been researching the architecture of the slaughterhouse in Argentina. The whole idea at the beginning was that they would have cooked empanadas, and as viewers, you would be eating these empanadas, and then you'd be exposed to this incredible research that they've done. Nowadays, well, the way that we found of translating that idea was to include the recipe in the film, and then, so there's still a kind of an invitation if you want to kind of make them, but think while you're making them, perhaps in a different way. But yeah, that element of collective performance is something that I'm maybe I'm so attached to it, just perhaps because that's also the way that I've practiced. Yeah, I'm sorry that didn't happen. That's for sure. But I hope, with these projects that have a certain reality in the city, I hope that through use they kind of provide these moments of collective performance. I don't know. We will see. There's another project opening up now in it should be next week actually, which is a dance stage. I don't know if you know about it, by Dance Mana.
Yes.
It's a group of Swedish architects, and they found through research that public spaces are used by men or boys, young men, more than by young women. And they in the beginning they did this research in Sweden, and then they realized that this was kind of common to other places as well. And so now they're installing, and they started creating dance stages as a means to encourage women to use public space, because dance is a way that they found quite effective of female kind of reclaiming public space. And then Ulya Soley did this incredible research about how also in Istanbul, specifically in the 60s and 70s, dance was a cultural practice very connected with female emancipation as well. And we realized, okay, this could be quite interesting, and we decided to install that stage at Kalanish Park. And now Ulya is collaborating with different dance companies and groups that will activate this space. So again, there will be workshops if you're interested. Also a kind of meditation activity where you can go. But the whole point is that you can connect your mobile phone to the stage as well, so you can play your music. So I hope you use it. So in a sense, that element of performance, I think, hopefully will still be there. But yeah, maybe less choreographed. Maybe that's interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so Eileen is asking a question. Eileen, do you want to ask it yourself since you wrote it? No, you don't want to. Okay. Eileen is an undergraduate 4th-year student. So she's saying, I'm reading Motamot. Thank you for your presentation. Aslıhan mentioned we are designing a natural history museum. There's a lot of systems and layers of the earth. So if we think about how can we present the complicated world, the presentation showed me how can different perspectives come together like the complicated systems in the same earth. And how can we present these with different scales? I think trying to look at everything in daily life can show us different perspectives. It's more clear now how everything relates to each other. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I thought it was a question, but it was a thank you. Okay. Right. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a really nice way to put it. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I was also going to maybe just I know you're tired, so let me know when you want out.
I will have to leave in 5 minutes just because I have another meeting at 6.
Perfect. So maybe in 5 minutes, and since Eileen just at the right time talked about the right subject, maybe a couple of ways in which the class can approach. What would you say briefly about how to approach to the subject of Museum of Natural History? Or
yeah. Actually, it's quite funny because a couple of things. So when I became fascinated by this term empathy, I was doing a project in the Azores archipelago, in the which is an archipelago of islands in the Atlantic Ocean. And the Azores are volcanic islands, and they sit at the intersection of three tectonic plates. Plates? How do you say
Plates.
placas?
Yeah, plates.
Mm-hmm. And so it's an area of a lot of volcanic activity still today. The last big eruption happened in the 50s. The Azores were populated by humans in the 14th century. But it's quite interesting because the Azores sit kind of halfway through between, in the Atlantic. So between, in a way, what used to be the old and the new world. A lot of species stayed in the Azores as a kind of a waiting and testing time to then be brought to the natural history and botanical gardens, more so in Europe, in the north of Europe. So these islands were like a testing bed for these plants, which is quite interesting. But anyway, I was doing research there, and we were going, with the decorators, we were going to do a project. We were, in a way, foreigners doing a project in the Azores, even though I'm Portuguese, but, I don't live there.
Yeah.
And so we started reading these books that were stories about the expeditions that took place in the Azores. And the expeditions in the Azores they happened mostly in the 19th century, mostly by North European thinkers, scientists. And when I read those books, I realized that there was something very interesting about them and common to them. It was this 19th century rational mentality, right, of classifying, categorizing, numbering, nature and the people and the animals of the Azores. And this way of making knowledge from it's a distanced way of making knowledge, right? And so when I started first thinking about empathy, it was that, in relation to that, thinking, okay, how can we generate knowledge, but from an embodied starting point, not just how can we do that? And we didn't know, and we tried out, a project with a series of people. But what's interesting is the Natural History Museum, of course, is a typology that is kind of belongs to the same world of expeditions and sort of 19th century rationalism. So I suppose the idea of an implicated perspective, knowledge that is embodied, I think, is potentially it's what I think could be interesting to explore in relation to the Natural History Museum. And interestingly, the term, and when I was in the Azores, an artist that was there at the same time, she told me, because I was using the term empathy, but a little bit intuitively, and then she told me, I just read this article in the Atlantic, just came out. I think it had come out, I don't know, a week before, something, about the term emerging in the 19th century, or just at the turn of the century. And then that's what led me to the book that's by Susan Lanzoni, which is an incredible effort, 10 years of research about the evolution of the term empathy. And that book became really quite central to my thinking for this biennial. And also, if you go to Pera, that carpet that is there and curtain by the Rodina,
yes.
That is also, it's a geography inspired by this book by Susan Lanzoni as well. So maybe tomorrow, if you're free, tomorrow in the afternoon, let me check what time. But Teresa Ruler, the Rodina, she's going to give a tour of this geography online. So I think it might be really interesting, based, just from your questions and so on. I think you'll be it might be interesting for you in light of your project for the Natural History Museum.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's so interesting. There's so many overlaps, and it's so nice to hear where you were looking at and how something else comes out of that, and that's very beautiful. You have another meeting, so we're not gonna
I will
keep you
leave
too
you.
long. So
very nice to meet you all. Really, really lovely. Thank you for your comments and questions. You've given me a lot to think about. And thanks, Aslıhan.
They have muted themselves, so can you just say bye-bye?
We say like this. Thank you, Aslıhan.
Thank you,
I look forward
Mariana.
to seeing what you produce as the Natural History Museum.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.